She walked home thinking she was safe. She was 17, full of hope, full of life. But that night, Anene Poison was betrayed, tortured, and left to die in a way so horrific it made international headlines. This isn't just a story of violence. It's a cry for justice that still echoes today. Before you scroll past, hear her name and hear a story. Welcome to Real Crimes, Real Stories. I will post true crime stories every week, and today's story is about Anene Poison. Anene Poison was born on the 30th of October 1995 in Brutality, a small town in the Western Cape of South Africa. Brutality is known as a quiet farming town surrounded by rolling fields, mountains, and the winds of the nearby Cape Agulhas. Like many small towns, life there was often marked by contrasts. While it was close-knit and community-driven, it also created the challenges of poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity that affect many rural areas in South Africa. Anene's early life was shaped by loss and hardship. Her biological mother passed away when Anene was still very young. For any child, the absence of a mother is a deep wound, and this would have shaped her early experiences of security and belonging. Fortunately, she and her brother were taken in by foster parents, Collier and Marco, who opened their home and hearts to the sibling. This gave Anene a sense of stability, though the economic struggles of the family remained very real. Despite these challenges, those who knew Anene describe her as a young girl full of energy with a bright smile and a playful nature. She was known to enjoy being with her friends, and she carried herself with a warmth that people remembered. Yet, like many teenagers growing up in under-resourced areas, she faced enormous social pressures. Opportunities were limited, and the cycle of poverty often meant that education was not always sustainable. Anene attended school in Brutality, but her path was cut short when she left after grade 7. Dropping out of school at such a young age is unfortunately common in parts of South Africa where children are forced to make sacrifices for the family's survival. In Anene's case, she began helping home and contributing where she could. It was a story of resilience, but also one of unfulfilled potential, a reflection of systemic issues that many South African youths face. Even outside of school, Anene was still a teenager navigating the world. At 17, she was stepping into young adulthood, balancing the need to help her family with her own personal growth, friendships, and dreams. Although little is documented about her ambitions, we can imagine that she, like many girls her age, must have had hopes for a better life, perhaps to work to build stability, and maybe one day to start her own family. But her story took a tragic turn. On the night of February 1st, 2013, Anene went out with friends, a common outing for young people in Brutality. They went to a pub called Kali's Pub. She drank alcohol and danced, and she was just having fun as always. At one point, she asked a friend to go get a change of clothes because her pants had torn. She left the pub briefly to do that. Then she returned to the pub and stayed for a while. Around 1 a.m. on the 2nd of February 2013, Anene said she was ready to go home. Her foster mom's house was about 6 blocks away from the pub. She was with Johannes Kana, who volunteered to walk with her. On the way, they passed a construction site where she was working. This is where the key attack happened. At the site, they began kissing. Anene at some point tried to push away Kana. Despite her protests, it is alleged that Kana raped her there. After that, more violence followed. Anene was found by a security guard at around 5 a.m. near the construction site. She was still alive, but gravely injured. Though she was rushed to the hospital, her injuries were too severe, and she passed away later that same day. She was just 17 years old. From her hospital bed, Anene identified between 5 to 6 men as having attacked her. She was reported to have named someone nicknamed Zwei and his friends as responsible. Zwei turned out to be a nickname shared by at least 2 men in the area. One was Jonathan Davids, known locally as Zwei. Another man with the same nickname lived elsewhere in Zwelitsha, so there was ambiguity over who exactly she meant. Two men were arrested initially, Johannes Kana, who was 21 years old at the time, and Jonathan Davids, who was 22 years old at the time. Kana allegedly confessed to raping and assaulting Boysen but denied murder. Davids was denied bail early on, but later the state dropped charges against him due to insufficient evidence. Her death sent ripples. The brutality of her murder highlighted the epidemic of gender-based violence in the country. South Africa, despite having a progressive constitution and legal protections for women, continues to struggle with some of the highest rates of sexual violence in the world. Anene's case became a painful symbol of this crisis. Leaders and activists across the country spoke out. Then President Jacob Zuma called the attacks shameful and urged society to stand together against violence. Non-governmental organizations mobilized, staging marches, vigils, and campaigns in her memory. For many, Anene's death was not just about the crime itself, but what it represented, the vulnerability of women and girls, particularly those from poor and marginalized communities. Her foster mom, Collier, grieved deeply. To her, Anene was not just a headline or a statistic, but a daughter, a girl she had raised, fed, and watched grow. The Olifers had tried to provide a home of safety and care, and her violent death was an unbearable loss. The criminal investigation led to the arrest of several suspects, though only one man, Johannes Kana, was ultimately convicted. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, but questions about justice lingered. Many asked how could such cruelty have happened, and what could be done to prevent future tragedies. Beyond the courtroom, Anene's story sparked deeper conversations. People began to speak more openly about the normalization of violence in South Africa. It highlighted how young women, especially those living in poverty, are most at risk. Her death underscored the urgent need for education, protection, and societal change. 12 years later, Anene's name is still remembered. Schools, organizations, and activists continue to speak of her when raising awareness about gender-based violence. Her life, though cut short, serves as a reminder of both vulnerability and resilience. In many ways, she represented countless girls across South Africa who face similar challenges: poverty, limited education, gender inequality, and unsafe environments. To tell Anene Boysen's story is not just to recall the tragedy of her death, but also to recognize her humanity. She was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a teenager with a future stolen. Her story calls on us to imagine what her life could have been, and to take responsibility for creating a world where young women like her can live, thrive, and grow without fear. Her name has become a symbol of remembrance and a call to action, that no other child should suffer the same fate, that every girl deserves the right to safety, education, and dignity. May her soul rest in peace, free from the suffering and cruelty she faced. Her life mattered and will continue to fight for justice in her name. And the following clips were taken during her trial.
Johannes Kana has been handed a double life sentence by Judge Patricia Goliath in the Swellendam Circuit Court for the rape and murder of Anene Boysen. Judge Goliath addressed Kana before sentencing him to 50 years in prison, saying that he shows no remorse for the cruel, inhumane actions that led to Boysen's death. Goliath cited the shock the community was in after Boysen's murder and said it would be in the best interests of the community and Kana that he be locked away for a long time. Renee de Villiers, Eyewitness News, Swellendam.
Witnesses, a security guard who found Boysen, as well as the first police officer at the scene, have both detailed the injuries Boysen sustained during the attack. They've each told the court how they found her lying on the ground with her intestines hanging out. Police Constable Ricardo Mertz testified that Boysen's eyes were beaten shut and her legs tucked under her body. The 17-year-old was so badly injured she was unable to speak All she could muster up was a moan. The state's third witness is a friend and former colleague of the accused, Johannes Kana. He says he last saw Boysen when she and Kana left a local pub. It's still unclear whether the court will accept his testimony that Kana had allegedly made a confession to him. The day's proceedings proved too much for Boysen's foster mother. Collier Olivier sat behind a one-way mirror for the duration of the proceedings. She has refused to comment on camera, but says she wants this ordeal and the trauma to end. Boysen was attacked allegedly on her way home from the pub in early February. She died in Cape Town hours later, but not before mentioning one of her alleged attackers, Jonathan Davids. Davids was acquitted earlier this year after investigators failed to secure enough evidence against him. Kana has since pleaded not guilty to charges of rape and murder. The state is expected to call another 49 witnesses to prove otherwise. Leanne Jansen, Swellendam Circuit Court in the Western Cape. Over a year later, it's the scene of another. This time, Boysen's foster mother, Collier Olivier. Olivier was diagnosed with cervical cancer in December. Within a few months, it had spread to her lymph nodes. She died at the Bredasdorp Otto Duplessis Hospital 10 days ago, before she could oversee the launch of the Anene Boysen Skills Development Center set up in her daughter's honor. Boysen was raped, beaten and disemboweled and left to die at a construction site a stone's throw away from her home. Earlier this month, Boysen's biological father, Klasie Spielman, was also killed, allegedly over 10 rand. It's begged the question from community leaders whether Boysen's brutal death has actually contributed to any change in their neighborhood.
Wat het Aline Boysen se dood vir u gedoen? Die strate was vol mense, enough is enough. Maar na daai, dus alles weg. Dus almal weer tevrede. En hierdie kerkleiers besluit, hulle kom by mekaar. Ons het koppe by mekaar. Ons sê dit kan nie so aangaan.
With Boysen's closest relative now dead, community members are left to take a hard look at exactly how to bring about change in their area.